Hey guys, this is Dr. Mike Lumeng. Welcome to another edition of Bootstrap MD. We've been recently talking about starting up your own practice and medical practices. And obviously, one subject that you can't ignore is money. I Bootstrap MD, I talk about how you bootstrap your way to doing it, but there are other ways that you can fund your clinic, fund your business. And of course, you can borrow money, and we all know about loans, and we've talked about getting loans from the federal government, from friends and family. But there's also another way that you can get revenue for your business, and that's through grants. And I'm excited that on the program right now is we have an expert, and who also happens to be a physician, which I love. I love that. She's a community health equity advocate, a physician, and the co-founder of Strong Children Wellness, which is an award-winning multi-practice healthcare company that partners with community organizations to deliver integrated healthcare to under-resourced communities, and secured over 1 million, that's 1 million in grants and contracts in less than 2 years. She's the founder of Melanin Medicine, which is a coaching and consulting firm to help mission-driven healthcare practices and organizations serving communities of color scale to ultimately create greater health justice. And we've just been talking on the program, and I know you're going to enjoy this. She's going to give us lots of information. I want to welcome to the program Dr. Omolara Thomas Uwemedimo. Omolara, how are you?
I am well. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm super excited to talk about money.
Awesome. Yeah, and I know doctors can be kind of weirded out with money, but I think when it comes time to building your business, building your practice, I would much rather have other people's money or other businesses or other communities' money to help fund my dream. So let's talk about it first. I want to a little bit know more about your background, how you got started. Believe you're a pediatrician by
Yeah.
by trade, right? Then how did you go from a pediatrician to talking about securing money and grants for all of your businesses and dreams that you built?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm a pediatrician by training, and I wanted to be a pediatrician since I was 5. So that happened. And ultimately, I ended up, one of the things that's really important in my work has been health equity. And so a lot of times when I was working in different spaces, the places I worked at, they were all very hospitals that were focused on under-resourced communities, but also very underfunded. And I think one of the issues as well was I would realize there's a gap here, and the administrators would say, well, we don't have money to fill that. And so me being the resourceful person I am, both from my background working not only in America, but also working in Africa and in Asia as a global health pediatrician, I was always really interested in how could we actually create the thing that we want rather than kind of succumb to this is not possible. And that led me to building up my research chops, which meant that basically, I was able to do operational research, which said I could get funding for programs by just evaluating whether or not they actually work for the people that I'm interested in helping. And so in academia, I got a really good track record of, I want to do this. Let me see what places potentially are wanting to fund this, and let's start developing relationships with those funders. And so ultimately, over time, within, I think, probably 7 years or so, I pretty much was just continuing to get grants with my team members, and it totaled to almost $2 million by the time that I left academia. But the real important thing was that all of the programs that we started were able to scale. And now one of the big places, the largest health system in New York, actually scaled one of our programs that started with a small grant. And so that's the exciting thing. But I was also burnt out. I was an MPH professor, a public health professor, seeing patients in Queens, which is the most diverse county in this country. Also, of course, running a global health program and teaching residents. And then, in addition, running 2 large research programs, and actually burnt out. And in 2019, in May, I actually lost the ability to walk and developed multiple sclerosis. I found out it was multiple sclerosis. So I had to take a leave. And unfortunately, when I finished that 4-month leave, I came back and was kind of like, I have to reposition my job to not be so stressful. And I mean, unfortunately, the organization, the workplace that I was at was not able to accommodate some of the supports and things I needed. So now I was in a place where I was like, okay, Omolara, you have to figure out, can you stay in the workplace or do you need to create the place that you would want to work at? And that was when I started thinking about Strong Children Wellness, which is the practice, and thinking about what would a practice that I wanted to work at look like? Like, what would be the things that I would put in it? And ultimately, one of the community partners that I had worked with for a while, I shared the idea of, this is what I think we can do. We can actually, how about we take physical healthcare and we actually bring it into your organization rather than the other way around, and see how that happens. And they loved the idea, of course. And we said, okay, but we have no capital or money. And they said, we don't either. So luckily I was used to that. And we actually decided to write it up, and we got $125,000 from a funder to basically pilot the project. And using that funding partnership model allow me to see, oh, this is something that's repeatable. And so ultimately we were able to find different nonprofits, different organizations that we could partner with, get access to grant funding, and use a model called fiscal sponsorship to basically have them subcontract us to deliver services, not only to their clients, but to the community at large. And that's how we've built it. I'll talk a little bit about the steps on how we do that, but that's kind of the story. And then once I started doing that, other people were like, how are you doing that again? And I transitioned a company called Melanin Medicine Motherhood, which was really born out of the fact as a Black woman and the weathering that I had about, like, how do you manage work-life integration? And ultimately, the way I did it was through entrepreneurship. And so then those who were coming along that I was coaching were kind of like, yeah, but we need money. And so then they wanted to learn how I did that. And so that's how Melanin and Medicine really morphed to really just supporting the funding part of developing your practice.
This is a subject where it's really difficult, that I see to find out really good information. I mean, I've had a little bit of experience with grants. My wife, who was a special needs teacher, and it was kind of like, as an aside, hey, we need to get grants and you need to figure this out. And she remembers, everybody's just like, the teachers are all like sighing, like, I don't even know where to begin. And they go to, I guess, grants.gov, and they start looking at all of these different grants, and they can't figure it out. And then by the end, it's just like, give it up. Let's just try to get a loan somewhere else. I don't know if that kind of rings true, but I know that rings true with a lot of people who are listening. So what are some like misnomers or mistakes that you see when people actually start this process? Because nobody really, I never got taught any of this. I wasn't in academia. Perhaps you got better experience than I have, but how did you get through all of this?
Yeah, I think, the biggest mistake that I would say people do is not utilizing their network and not looking at who's around them. So I think the first thing that we had to do was to recognize the fact that, yes, the majority of grants that are available don't go to for-profits. They go to non-for-profits. And we were like, oh, well, okay, that excludes us. But then through this model, I think it came up through conversation where we talked with this nonprofit, and they were like, well, how about we just like bring you guys in? And so we thought this was a really novel concept. It actually, when you look at it, there's a process called fiscal sponsorship that was built for that purpose. It was built to actually support small nonprofits or individuals who were waiting to get their nonprofit status and to fall under an established large nonprofit to still get access to grant funds. However, when you look at it, most people use it for nonprofits, but you can actually use it for for-profits too. And that was a game changer. There's like a whole directory of fiscal sponsors of actual organizations that's all they do for-profit and small nonprofits. So once I think the myth of, hey, we can actually access these dollars left, then all bets were off. We started to identify, okay, who's a nonprofit? who I think is more established, because both of you can't be on the struggle bus, right? So one person, you can't go to a nonprofit also like, I don't know, I want grant funding too. You need to, of course, find an established nonprofit that actually has, gravitas, has a funding track record, and that really is aligned. This is the most important thing. We're not just using nonprofits to get money, but they actually have to be aligned. And what we do is we support kind of, are they aligned in terms of their target population? Are they aligned in terms of the mission of what they're doing? And is it complementary? And once we're doing that, that allows for these to be easy connections. I think the hard part for people is the time, and is like trying to understand, who do I find out? How do I find out who these people are? And that's actually what our company does, because we did realize it took a long time to figure that out. But there are actually databases where you can find out foundations, you can find out grant opportunities outside of grants.gov that are more from private foundations. And I love private foundations just because it's faster to get the money and there's less red tape around it. And the nice thing about it is that your nonprofit partner is actually going to write the proposal and do the work. You just have to do your work. And so it's a really nice connection. And the nonprofit's extremely excited because now they have a new service that their board will be extremely excited about and will garner even more funding for them.
So one of the ways, at least I know my wife was frustrated, is like when she sees all of these different grants, and then you just kind of like, okay, this is what they want. And then you're kind of like, I think we could do that, even though it's like, it almost feels like you're kind of now changing your business, right? Because you're trying to like, wow, they're giving away a lot of money, but if we integrate, this protocol to it, do you ever experience that? I mean, is that something that comes up often, where it feels like you're almost like having to change your business to meet what they're asking for?
Yeah, so this is really important because that's the first part of our 6P process, but it's positioning your practice. And what I try to say is the goal is not to change your business, but to find the niches inside of your business. And what I mean by that is to say, I'm a pediatrician, right? But what social problem, what group is having health inequities that is actually within my population? So, for example, asthmatics, one of our clients was a pediatric pulmonologist, right? And they take care of all sorts of kids, but the asthmatics were a really, especially those that were very severe. And what she was finding was she could do a lot of the treatment, but what they needed was follow-up in the home. But she can't do that. And so we actually connected with her nonprofit that has community health workers and who couldn't take care of kids that were that severe because they didn't have the pulmonologists being able to support it. So it's about finding out what's the mission that sits inside of your practice. If I'm an oncologist, we have people from all over. We have a dermatologist, and she's focusing on alopecia and health inequity. You can find what that group is, and then what is the unique model of care? So I talk about the mission, then what is the model of care that helps you solve this problem differently from the competition? So how are you doing it differently? Are you more responsive, because of cultural diversity? Are you more robust? Are you more in depth and rigorous? And then the next part is not thinking so huge, but saying, okay, in the next 12 months, what could I achieve for this population? So we call it a minimum viable practice, the MVP, but what is the minimum viable practice? And being clear on the leanest version of the team, the tools, and the tech that you need. And then our money plan. So it's mission, model of care, minimum viable practice, and then your money plan, which just basically is how much do we need to actually do this and how much can your nonprofit put in? So a lot of times nonprofits actually help with space. So we did that in the beginning where we had space. We had a space issue. We didn't have space. And they were like, well, how about you provide the services inside of our space? And that was a great thing that took off a lot of money for us. And then we were able to do that. And the last thing is messaging, which is how do you make sure that you're able in the writing process, sharing kind of what the value is for the nonprofit that you're partnering with, and then what is the value and the impact for the population that both of you are serving. And that's your value proposition and then the result. So when you have all 5 of those things, you're able to position it now as like not just the regular practice, but now a social enterprise that really can get some funding. And then the process is now looking for who wants to fund that. And trust me, there are over 130,000 foundations. No matter how small you think your problem is, there is a foundation that is like, that's exactly what we do. And that's the work of us trying to uncover where those people are and what their funding priorities are.
At the time we're recording this, we're still uneasy in the economy. They say we're in inflation. We are in inflation. But I've heard the statistic that there's a lot of these grants that never get filled. Is that true, or is money still tight, or is there money still plentiful and we just have to go out and find it?
Yeah, I mean, money is still plentiful. Actually, I will say, right, the people who donate to foundations during the pandemic got a lot richer. And we see that, and I mean, ultimately we see that in down economies, actually, the people who are the usual suspects, right, to fund and provide philanthropic dollars actually end up having even more disposable income. What I will say is that during 2021 and 2022, the amount of money that was dispersed was even higher than it had been for 3 years before that. And the amount that was focused on health was higher. And you can imagine that was due to COVID and now kind of racial inequities and other inequities. So there's this moment, I'm not sure how long it's going to last, but health is very much a hot place and a hot button for us. So while that is an issue, what we found is that for us, that hasn't been an issue as long as you're developing relationships and not just looking for what's available right now.
Yeah. So, I have a little bit of experience on grants. My practice was, as many other practices was affected during the pandemic. And I just found a grant for Asian Pacific owners, and go, well, I'm Asian, I'll apply. And I found it on YouTube, and I got a $25,000 grant, which I was really excited about. It didn't take much work at all. But then when it came down to like, okay, how can I get more of this? I was stuck. I didn't really know where to go. So, there are people who are listening to this who maybe have their own practice. Maybe they want to start up their own practice, and they're looking for funding. Maybe you could walk us, a process of how to even get started with something like this.
Yeah. So the first thing I talked about was position, and that's like more of your inner work, right? Of what you have to do and think about, okay, what do I want my practice to do? What's the potential social mission that my practice can solve? So not shifting your whole business, but identifying that piece in it. The next thing that we have to do is package it. And that's the problem that I think a lot of people don't do. And that's why they're like, oh, I gotta now do all of this to apply, instead of it being kind of like, oh, we can apply here. Now we can apply here. And now we can apply here. And what it is creating reusable assets. And so we help people to create a master grant proposal, basically. And we have both a done for you service, or like, if you want help doing it. But that allows for now us to have everything in there, your statement of need, what the problem is, what the value proposition is, and literally like, I just submitted something last week for 280,000, and it was it was just like, oh, this is available. Okay. And that's the problem, because most times we find grants, it's like, the deadline is next week. And people are like, oh, always happens. Always. Always. But if you're packaged, then it's not an issue. And so you need to have an executive summary. You need to have those kind of things and an elevator pitch, which I'll share why that's important. That's about pipeline development. So what you want to do is also start having somebody, and we'll talk about that, but it can be you or your EA or VA, start to go to doing just research on foundations in your state. So you can just look up California Foundations Health, right? Just Google that. You'll start to see what foundations come up. And what you want to do is you want to look at which ones are your ideal funding organizations. And then you want to look at who's on their portfolio, who have they funded? Because when you look at that, that tells you the nonprofits who are doing well because they're getting funding from them, and also the nonprofits that they're likely to fund again, because it's less risky to fund a funded organization that you funded before. And then you can go on certain grant sites. There's Grant Watch, which is not grants.gov. It's like, an open source, and you can start looking for it. Those are much cheaper. The databases that we use are more robust, but they also cost a lot per month. And you can find those funding opportunities, or your VA can do. We have people who have their VAs do it so that they have that list and they can run through it. So we talked about position, we talked about packaging and developing a pipeline of resources, and then presenting the opportunity. That's where people, I don't know why as physicians I don't know what it is. We minimize our impact. We're kind of like, I don't know if I should reach out. And it's like, you have this amazing service. You are a physician. They will really enjoy the fact that you've reached out to them. And so we help people develop an elevator pitch so they can connect. Then we help them with giving them our guide to doing a discovery call with that organization to collect information. And then they can use that master proposal and tweak it to basically curate what it is that, now for this organization, how they could curate what they're doing. The last thing, the easy stuff, pretty much compared to that, is partnering, which means you guys have to talk. Okay, what are the terms of agreement? Are you gonna hire that person? Am I gonna hire it? Are you gonna do space? So we talk through that. You get your lawyers, create the templates and stuff, which we have templates of that. And then get people. Once you get that, then you just want people like interns. We use a lot of interns, and they help us with our community outreach, community engagement interns. And they're basically helping source, schedule more meetings with funders or with organizations. And that way you can just show up and, share your model. And that's kind of how we've been able to get these grants, and then also contracts, because a lot of times the organizations who are really robust are like, we don't even want to wait for the grant. We actually want to subcontract you, and we can look for the grant in the meantime. So we've gotten contracts by way of looking for grants.
That's wonderful. How many grant proposals do you think you or your team have written in the last few years?
Oh my gosh, I should know that question. I would say in the last few years, or since inception, we've probably done maybe 12. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not bad. But the reason is that we don't need a lot of quantity, because we focus on $100,000 or more grants, usually like 50 sometimes, but they're usually average is 150. Our largest one that we got was 250,000. And, at one time, but then they just, once you can reuse and repackage, then that's how come it's, been so many that so much money that we're able to accrue in such a short time.
Sounds like you have it down to a science.
Yeah.
This has been amazing. Where can they go to get more information, and tell us about your firm?
Yeah, so Melanin Medicine is a healthcare funding consultancy, and we've worked with both for-profit healthcare practices that are mission driven, I like to say, and nonprofits as well, and that are focused on health equity. And so our work, primarily, we've initially started with women of color, but we've had men, we've had other people who are like, please help. And so we're able to provide VIP services. We have both a mastermind and done for you services that we provide. And you can find out more about us. We don't send our investment guide or anything, but we have people apply and we can do intakes. And then we also have classes and webinars. So you can go to bit.ly/melanin and medicine. You can also find us on Instagram or LinkedIn. And actually at the end of the month, I posted this. that we have a workshop that I'm a high introvert, Mike. I don't like doing live anything, but I'm doing a live workshop just for Women's History Month. And you can actually apply if you text us and like, I'm interested in a workshop. We will send you the application, and then we're inviting people to that 3-hour workshop where we're going to go through these processes. But yeah, and you can go to bit.ly/Melanin Medicine and you can see everything.
Awesome. This is obviously we're just kind of scratching the surface on your knowledge and what you have in there. But any last minute thoughts or advice that you have for someone who is thinking about getting to the process, or maybe we're in the middle of the process right now and kind of feeling stuck? What advice can you give them?
I think don't put it all on yourself. I think that was the best thing that we did, which was identifying like who else can help you, and I think a lot of us have like these ideas of an intern or a family member or somebody connected who says, hey, can this person work at your practice or do something in your practice? And that is such an opportunity. So I think a lot of times this gets overwhelming when we think that we're doing it all by ourselves, but literally you can go through this process and you can have someone doing that research for you so that we can start. And just think about one, like what one grant would do for you, right? How it would help you. And then we can think about pipelines, but just focusing on one and looking around, looking at your network and seeing who else would I love to work with that is serving the population that I really want to make a dent in. And those I think are really helpful.
Thank you, Omolara. Again, her site is Melanin and Medicine. We'll have the link in the show notes where you can go find out more information. Like you said, money is everywhere. So who better to have it than you and your organization? If you have a dream and you want to get that accomplished, money can allow you to do this. Thank you again for joining us on the program. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Mike. I'm glad to be able to share.
And thank you for listening. And as always, guys, if you get stuck in your business, there's always people out there knowledgeable who can help. There's always a way out. Always remember, you can always keep moving forward.